Italian soldiers were shocked when the war reached their doorstep. In July 1943, Allied landings in Sicily shattered Italy's sense of distance from the front. Coastal defenses collapsed rapidly. The invasion directly led to Mussolini's removal within weeks. July 10, 1943, just before dawn. Southern coast of Sicily, near Gela. The night wind carries the smell of salt and diesel fuel as Caporale Salvatore Greco tightens the strap of his steel helmet. He is 23 years old, a baker's son from Agrigento, and until this moment the war has always existed somewhere else. Across maps pinned to barracks walls, across radio reports filled with German victories and distant bombings. Africa, Russia, the Atlantic, never here. The surf should be empty at this hour. Instead, the sea is alive. Greco squints into the darkness. At first, he thinks the horizon is playing tricks on him. A line of shadows, low and wide, breaking where water should meet sky. Then the sound reaches him. A deep, layered thrum. Not the clean hum of Italian fishing boats, but something heavier. Engines by the dozens. No, by the hundreds. Madonna! Someone whispers behind him. Searchlights snap on along the coast, white beams slicing across rolling waves. For a brief second, everything freezes in harsh clarity. The sea is black with ships, landing craft packed nose to nose. Destroyers farther out, their silhouettes sharp and purposeful. The water churns as if Sicily itself is being pulled toward the horizon. The alarm siren wails too late. Italian coastal guns open fire, their shells streaking out blindly, splashing uselessly short or sailing high into the night. The gunners have practiced this drill 100 times. None of them ever believed it would happen for real. Greco drops into his trench as the first naval shells slam into the beach behind him. The ground jumps. Sand and stone rain down. The smell of cordite burns his throat. Somewhere to his left, a machine gun chatters once, then goes silent. This is not a raid. This is not a demonstration. This is an invasion. Above the shoreline, flares bloom like artificial moons. Under their light, Allied soldiers pour from landing craft, running through surf up to their waists, rifles held high, faces tight with concentration. Some fall immediately, cut down by scattered Italian fire. Most keep coming. Greco raises his Carcano rifle, his hands shaking so badly, he has to press his elbows into the trench wall to steady himself. He fires once. He has no idea if he hits anything. Behind him, a lieutenant shouts orders that dissolve into the roar of naval guns. Communications wires have already been severed. The radio in the command bunker crackles uselessly, filled with static and overlapping voices screaming for instructions that will never come. Within minutes, the defensive line begins to fold. Not in panic, but in disbelief. Trenches designed to stop a token landing are being crushed by armor rolling straight off the beaches. American Sherman tanks crawl forward, engines growling, their turrets swinging with calm, methodical precision. Italian soldiers retreat inland in small clusters, glancing over their shoulders as if expecting the sea to vanish behind them, as if this entire scene might still dissolve into rumor. By sunrise, the beach is no longer Italian territory. Farther north, near Syracuse, British troops push ashore under similar conditions. Strong winds scattering paratroopers, units landing miles from their intended objectives, confusion everywhere. Yet none of it slows the advance. The defenders are thin, poorly supplied, and psychologically unprepared for the simple truth unfolding in real time. The war has crossed the water. In Rome, radios crackle to life as reports arrive in fragments. Landings confirmed. Multiple sectors. Heavy enemy presence. The phrases used are cautious, bureaucratic, but the implication is unmistakable. For the first time since the war began, Italy itself is under direct assault. Benito Mussolini will be informed later that morning. By then, the shock has already spread faster than any communique. From coastal villages to mountain barracks, Italian soldiers stare at the same realization settling into their bones. The war they were told existed to protect the homeland has arrived at its doorstep. And it is not asking permission to enter. July 10, 1943. Mid-morning. Inland from Gela. The sun rises hard and merciless, burning away the smoke that clings to the low hills. What remains is clarity, and with it, fear. Caporale Salvatore Greco stumbles along a dirt road with 6 other men from his unit, none of them certain who is in command anymore. Their lieutenant disappeared sometime before dawn, last seen arguing with a German liaison officer beside a smashed radio truck. The argument ended when a naval shell landed too close for either of them to finish the sentence. Now the men move because stopping feels worse. Villagers stand in doorways as the soldiers pass, old men clutching rosaries, women holding children tight against their hips. No one cheers. No one salutes. A few ask questions. Are the Americans here? But no one has answers that sound like orders. From a rise in the road, Greco sees Allied aircraft overhead, flying low and unchallenged. They do not bomb indiscriminately. They circle, observe, and move on, as if they already own the sky. Italian anti-aircraft guns fire sporadically, the bursts wide and ineffective. The sense of control, fragile to begin with, dissolves completely. At divisional headquarters, maps are already obsolete. Lines drawn the night before no longer correspond to reality. Entire coastal units have vanished from the situation board, not destroyed so much as absorbed by the countryside, broken into fragments that drift inland without cohesion. A colonel slams his fist against a table and demands to know where the German reserves are. No one answers. The truth is whispered, not reported. German units are present, but few, scattered, and operating under their own command priorities. They had expected Italy to hold the beaches. Italy had expected Germany to intervene decisively. Instead, both sides wait for the other to act. By afternoon, Allied armor has pushed several miles inland. Supply columns follow smoothly, landing craft returning to sea and coming back again with fuel, ammunition, radios, engineers. The operation has momentum, a quality Italian officers recognize instinctively and dread. Greco's group halts near an olive grove as a staff car screeches to a stop on the road. A major jumps out, his uniform immaculate, his face pale beneath the brim of his cap. "You will form a defensive line here," he says, gesturing vaguely toward the hills. "Hold until further orders." "Against what, sir?" someone asks. The major hesitates just long enough. "Enemy reconnaissance," he replies, though the distant rumble of engines contradicts him immediately. They dig shallow foxholes in rocky soil that refuses the shovel. Sweat pours down Greco's back. His canteen is nearly empty. He has not eaten since the night before. When the first American patrol appears at the edge of the grove, it is almost anticlimactic. A handful of soldiers moving cautiously, rifles ready, not charging, not shouting. Professionals advancing into space already conceded by confusion. A brief exchange of fire follows. Shots echo sharply. One Italian soldier drops, clutching his leg, screaming more in shock than pain. The Americans withdraw as calmly as they arrived. No pursuit is ordered. No counterattack is planned. By evening, a new instruction arrives. Fall back again. This pattern repeats across Sicily. Orders issued late. Movements made without coordination. Units retreating not because they are destroyed, but because no one can explain what they are supposed to defend anymore. The psychological damage is far worse than the physical losses. Italian soldiers begin to understand something unspoken but unmistakable. This war was never meant to be fought on Italian soil. Not like this. Not house by house, village by village, under foreign aircraft and naval guns that cannot be answered. That night, as Greco lies awake beneath an open sky, tracer fire arcs faintly in the distance. Somewhere beyond the hills, the Allies are building roads, depots, command posts, infrastructure for permanence. This is not a passing storm. It is occupation in motion. And far away, in Rome, a man who once promised glory studies reports that no longer contain victories, only delays. July 12, 1943. Outskirts of Caltagirone. The road curves through low stone walls and vineyards scorched pale by the Sicilian sun. Caporale Salvatore Greco marches with his rifle slung over his shoulder, boots blistered, uniform stiff with dried sweat and dust. 2 days ago, he believed he was retreating to regroup. Now he understands the word for what it really means. Running. Ahead of him, the column stretches unevenly. Infantry mixed with artillery crews who have abandoned their guns. Supply drivers who no longer know where their depots are. Wounded men walking because there are no trucks left to carry them. No flags mark units. Rank insignia have become decorative rather than functional. Overhead, the sky belongs entirely to the Allies. American fighter bombers appear without warning. Diving low, engines screaming, guns flashing. They do not need to destroy much. They strafe intersections, scatter columns, force men into ditches and olive groves where they lie helpless, waiting for the sound to pass. When the aircraft vanish, the column reforms more slowly, more quietly. No one talks about victory anymore. At a temporary command post in a requisition schoolhouse, senior officers argue behind closed doors. Maps cover the blackboard where children once learned arithmetic. The chalk lines now represent imaginary defenses that no longer correspond to any terrain under Italian control. A general removes his cap and wipes his forehead with a handkerchief. This was not supposed to happen like this, he says to no one in particular. Italy's military doctrine has always assumed distance as a shield. The Mediterranean was meant to be a moat. The army's role was to support, to occupy, to reinforce German strength elsewhere, not to absorb the full weight of a modern amphibious assault. Now that assumption has collapsed. Reports from the coast confirm what everyone already senses. Gela is lost. Syracuse is lost. Allied forces are pushing north and west, meeting resistance only where German units have taken the lead. Where Italians fight alone, the outcome is brief and uneven. Morale fractures unevenly as well. Some soldiers fight with a kind of fatal stubbornness, defending crossroads and villages until ammunition runs out. Others surrender at the first opportunity, emerging from cover with hands raised, not out of cowardice, but out of clarity. They know the war has already moved beyond them. Greco witnesses his first mass surrender that afternoon. An entire platoon from another regiment stands beside the road, helmets stacked neatly at their feet, rifles laid down with deliberate care. An American officer speaks calmly to them through an interpreter, directing them toward the rear. No one is beaten. No one is insulted. The prisoners walk away in silence, escorted but unharmed. Greco feels something loosen in his chest. Not relief, not fear, but a dangerous thought he pushes away immediately. It doesn't have to end in blood. That evening, as Italian units continue to fall back toward the interior, German discipline becomes more visible and more distant. German columns pass through Italian formations without slowing, moving with purpose toward defensible terrain. Orders are crisp. Equipment is intact. Their war is not collapsing. It is repositioning. The contrast is humiliating. Italian soldiers watch the Germans go with mixed resentment and envy. The alliance that once promised shared glory now feels painfully unequal. Italy bleeds first. Germany calculates. In Rome, Benito Mussolini listens as his generals explain the situation in careful language. They avoid the word defeat. They speak instead of elastic defense, temporary withdrawals, and strategic realignments. Mussolini says little. For 20 years, he has presented himself as the architect of a new Roman Empire, a leader who would restore Italy's place among great powers. Now, for the first time, the war threatens not only his armies, but the myth that sustains him. Sicily is not just territory. It is proof. Proof that fascist Italy cannot defend itself without German intervention. Proof that the population is exposed. Proof that the war cannot be kept at arm's length any longer. As night falls, Greco lies beside a dry stone wall, staring up at unfamiliar stars. Somewhere beyond them, Allied logistics continue to flow uninterrupted. Radios hum, engines idle. Orders are issued that will be followed. For Italy, the illusion of control is gone. What remains is the question no one yet dares to ask aloud. If the war can reach Sicily so easily, how long before it reaches Rome? July 15, 1943. Hill country north of Enna. The terrain rises sharply, folding into ridges and valleys that smell of dust, time, and old stone. For centuries, these hills have been barriers, against invaders, against time itself. Now they are obstacles that slow everyone equally. Caporale Salvatore Greco climbs with his unit at dawn, lungs burning, pack cutting into his shoulders. The men no longer ask where they are going. They ask only how far. At the crest of a ridge, they stop to rest. Below them, a village lies quiet, church bell tower intact, laundry still hanging from balconies. It looks untouched, which somehow makes the distant thud of artillery even more obscene. War does not belong here. That is the thought that keeps returning, uninvited. A runner arrives with fresh orders, breathless and pale. The message is short and strangely final: hold the high ground. Delay the enemy. No further retreat authorized. The words sit heavily between them. They dig in again, this time with more care. Stone walls are reinforced. Machine guns are positioned to cover narrow approaches. Ammunition is counted and recounted. Someone produces a single map, already creased and stained, showing roads the Allies will inevitably use. When the first British units appear late that afternoon, they do so cautiously, probing rather than charging. Mortar rounds fall with professional precision, forcing the Italians to keep their heads down. The air fills with dust and chipped stone. Shouts echo off the hills. The fighting here is different, slower, more personal. Greco fires until his rifle barrel burns his palm. He sees shapes moving between olive trees and fires again. A man beside him is hit in the shoulder and pulled back, swearing, furious more than afraid. For a moment, just a moment, the Italians hold. Then the artillery speaks. Shells crash into the hillside, collapsing sections of wall, burying weapons and men alike. The ground itself seems to turn against them, sliding, breaking apart under repeated impact. When the barrage lifts, British infantry advances methodically, supported by armor creeping forward where the road allows. By nightfall, the order comes anyway: withdraw. The hill is abandoned not because it is indefensible, but because holding it no longer changes anything. Greco passes through the village in darkness, boots echoing on stone. A woman stands in a doorway, holding a lantern. She watches the soldiers go, her face unreadable. When Greco meets her eyes, she does not ask questions. She does not curse him either. She simply nods. That gesture follows him long after the village disappears behind the bend in the road. Across Sicily, the same realization takes root. This is no longer a campaign fought for ideology or empire. It is being fought on doorsteps, in fields meant for harvest, among people who never chose to host history's violence. Civilians begin to adapt faster than the army does. White sheets appear in windows. Church bells ring not for mass, but as warnings of approaching aircraft. Families move valuables into cellars. The population senses something Italian leadership does not yet admit. The Allies are not here temporarily. They are advancing toward permanence. German command responds by tightening its grip. Italian units are placed under German tactical control more frequently. Orders come in sharper tones. Cooperation turns into supervision. Where Italians hesitate, Germans do not. Resentment grows quietly. Italian soldiers feel it when German officers scold them for withdrawing, ignoring the lack of ammunition, the absence of air cover, the exhaustion that no rhetoric can erase. The alliance is no longer equal even in appearance. In Rome, the atmosphere darkens. Mussolini receives daily briefings that grow shorter and more grim. Sicily is not being stabilized. It is being lost. The promised counterattacks have failed to materialize. The Germans, though fighting effectively, are clearly preparing for something beyond the island. The Duce's confidence, once theatrical, booming, unshakable, begins to fray at the edges. He retreats into silence during meetings, staring at maps as if they might contradict the words spoken aloud. For the fascist Grand Council, a forbidden thought begins to circulate. If Mussolini cannot protect Italy from invasion, what purpose does he still serve? Greco learns nothing of politics as he collapses beside a road that night, too tired to dream. But he feels the shift all the same. The ground beneath him no longer feels like a front line. Feels like the center. And centers, once exposed, are never safe again. July 18, 1943. Central Sicily, along the road to Messina. The road north is clogged with movement, but none of it feels coordinated. Columns of Italian infantry trudge alongside mule carts piled with ammunition crates they will likely never fire. Trucks idle without fuel. Field kitchens sit abandoned at crossroads, pots still warm, as if the men who used them simply evaporated. Caporale Salvatore Greco marches with his head down, conserving energy, listening to the rhythm of boots on stone. Around him, conversations have changed. The men no longer speculate about when reinforcements will arrive. They talk instead about families, about farms, about whether Palermo is still intact, about whether Naples will be next. Overhead, Allied aircraft continue their patrols, but something else has changed as well. They are no longer cautious. Bombs fall on rail yards, bridges, supply depots, the arteries of Italy's ability to move or resist. Each explosion feels surgical, deliberate, aimed not at terror but at inevitability. At a roadside halt, Greco overhears two sergeants arguing in low voices. They say the Germans are pulling divisions out. One says, "To where?" The other replies. The first shrugs. "Mainland. Rome. Somewhere that matters." The implication is clear enough. German strategy is no longer focused on saving Sicily. It is focused on surviving Italy. Italian soldiers absorb this realization slowly, like a sickness creeping through the body. The idea that Germany might abandon the island, abandon them, confirms what many already feel in their bones. They were never partners in this war. They were buffers. In Messina, headquarters prepares for evacuation even as orders continue to demand resistance. Files are burned. Fuel reserves are earmarked for German use first. Italian officers receive conflicting instructions. Hold positions, but prepare to withdraw. Cooperate fully, but maintain sovereignty. Resist, but do not provoke. None of it forms a coherent path forward. Greco's unit is assigned to a blocking position overlooking a narrow pass. It is an ideal defensive spot, and for once the logic makes sense. If the Allies must advance, they will have to come through here. They wait through the heat of the afternoon, listening to distant artillery and the faint hum of engines. When the attack comes, it is brief and overwhelming. British armor advances under smoke cover. Infantry follows close behind. Within an hour, the pass is compromised. A German officer arrives near sunset, furious, demanding explanations. He speaks sharply, gesturing toward the hills as if willpower alone might push the Allies back. An Italian captain responds stiffly, pointing to empty ammunition crates, to exhausted men slumped against rocks. The argument ends without resolution. That night, the Germans pull back without warning. Italian units are left exposed. Greco wakes before dawn to the sound of artillery, closer than before. Panic ripples through the line as men realize their flank is gone. Orders arrive too late. Withdrawal becomes flight. By mid-morning, the pass is in Allied hands. Word spreads quickly, faster than any official communique. Sicily is effectively split in two. The remaining Axis forces are retreating toward the northeast corner of the island. Funneled toward Messina like debris carried by a current they can no longer fight. In Rome, the news lands with devastating clarity. The invasion was not contained. The army did not rally. The people are watching. Members of the fascist Grand Council begin to meet quietly, without Mussolini's presence. For years, loyalty has been performative, enforced by fear, rewarded by proximity to power. Now, power itself looks fragile. One council member voices what others have been thinking. If the war is lost in Sicily, he says, it will be lost in Italy. No one contradicts him. Greco, trudging north under a sun that feels heavier with each step, does not know that history is accelerating toward a decision. But he feels the pressure all the same, a tightening sense that something enormous is about to give way. The war has reached Italy's doorstep. Now it is knocking on the door of its leadership. July 24, 1943.
Rome. Palazzo Venezia.
The heat inside the council chamber is stifling, trapped by heavy curtains drawn tight against the afternoon sun. Ceiling fans turn slowly, uselessly, stirring warm air that smells faintly of sweat, tobacco, and old paper. Around the long table sit men who have spent 2 decades learning how to agree with Benito Mussolini, and who now struggle with the unfamiliar weight of dissent. The Duce arrives late. He looks older than he did even a month ago. His uniform hangs looser on his frame. The famous jutting jaw is still there, but the theatrical certainty that once accompanied it has dulled. He takes his seat at the head of the table and surveys the room with narrowed eyes. Outside, air raid sirens wail again, distant but audible. The meeting begins formally, cautiously. Reports from Sicily are presented in language that can no longer disguise reality. The island is lost. Axis forces are evacuating. Allied troops are already preparing to move on. Mussolini listens in silence, fingers drumming lightly on the table. Then Dino Grandi speaks. His voice is calm, controlled, but there is steel beneath it. He argues that the war has become untenable, that Italy's alliance with Germany has brought catastrophe to Italian soil, that continued loyalty to a failing course risks national destruction. He proposes a motion, carefully worded, deliberately indirect, calling for the restoration of the king's constitutional authority over the armed forces. It is, in effect, a vote of no confidence. The room goes very quiet. For a moment, Mussolini looks genuinely surprised. Not angry, not outraged, simply startled, as if a piece of furniture has spoken back. He responds with a familiar mix of sarcasm and bluster, dismissing the proposal as defeatism, accusing its supporters of cowardice. But the words do not land the way they once did. One by one, council members speak, some cautiously, some passionately, all with the same underlying message. Italy is breaking, and the Duce's leadership has not prevented it. When the vote is finally called, hands rise slowly, hesitantly, then with growing certainty. 19 in favor, 7 against, 1 abstention. Mussolini sits motionless as the numbers are read aloud. For the first time since 1922, a decision has been made about Italy without his consent, and against his will. The meeting adjourns without drama. No guards rush in. No arrests are made. The machinery of dictatorship, it turns out, can fail quietly. That night, Mussolini returns to his residence uncertain of what the morning will bring. He does not sleep. The next day, July 25th, he is summoned to meet King Victor Emmanuel III. The meeting is brief, polite, almost gentle. When Mussolini leaves the palace, he is arrested by officers of the Carabinieri and driven away in an unmarked ambulance, as if illness, not collapse, has taken him from power. Word spreads through Rome in stunned disbelief. El Duce is gone. In Sicily, Caporale Salvatore Greco hears the news secondhand, delivered by a driver who has just come south with supplies. First, Greco assumes it is a joke. Then he sees the driver's face. "È finita," the man says quietly. It's over. Greco does not cheer. No one does. Instead, there is a strange, fragile stillness. A sense that a storm has passed, but the sky has not yet cleared. The war has not ended. The Allies are still advancing. German forces are still present, increasingly wary and increasingly independent. But something fundamental has shifted. The regime that brought Italy into this war has collapsed under the weight of its own promises. For soldiers like Greco, the shock is almost greater than the invasion itself. The man whose image once filled every square and classroom has vanished in a single afternoon. If Mussolini can fall, what else might change? September 9th, 1943. Northern Sicily. Morning comes without relief. Caporale Salvatore Greco wakes on the roadside where he fell asleep, stiff and hollow, his rifle gone, his helmet kicked aside sometime during the night. Around him, the remains of his unit stand in small, uncertain clusters, unarmed men in uniforms that no longer mean anything. German trucks idle nearby, engines humming steadily. Soldiers move with practiced efficiency, establishing control points, posting guards, issuing clipped orders in a language that now carries only threat. No one explains anything. An Italian lieutenant approaches a German officer, his posture rigid with forced dignity. He gestures toward the radio truck, toward the men, toward the road leading south. The German officer listens, expression unreadable. Then he shakes his head. The lieutenant opens his mouth to protest. He never finishes. 2 German soldiers step forward, rifles raised just enough to make the message unmistakable. The lieutenant backs away. Greco watches the exchange and feels the final illusion collapse. The armistice was supposed to end the war for Italy. Instead, it has stripped Italian soldiers of the only fragile protection they still possessed, clarity. Some men are marched away toward holding areas, told they will be relocated. Others are ordered to disperse, warned not to interfere. A few attempt to flee into the hills and are fired upon as examples. By afternoon, Italian military authority in Sicily has ceased to exist. The Germans do not call it occupation. They call it necessity. Across the island and across the mainland, the same scene unfolds. Units disarmed. Officers arrested. Former allies transformed into captives or fugitives overnight. Those who refuse are shot. Those who comply are shipped north into a new category of imprisonment. Not prisoners of war, but Italian military internees, denied protections, stripped even of the dignity of defeat. Greco avoids capture by accident rather than design. A German patrol is diverted by an air raid siren, Allied aircraft roaring overhead. In the confusion, Greco slips away with 2 others, scrambling into rocky terrain thick with scrub and dry grass. They do not speak until nightfall. When they do, the conversation is short. "We go home," one man says. Greco nods. There is nothing left to argue. As they move through abandoned fields and villages, they see the consequences of Italy's collapse everywhere. Fascist buildings stand open and empty, portraits smashed, documents scattered in the street. Civilians watch from behind shutters, uncertain whether these soldiers are still soldiers, or just men passing through the wreckage of a state that has failed them. The war has fractured Italy into pieces moving in different directions. In the north, German forces dig in, preparing to defend against the inevitable Allied advance up the peninsula. In the south, Allied troops land unopposed, greeted cautiously by populations relieved simply to be spared further destruction. In the middle, chaos reigns. Authority contested, loyalties unclear, violence unpredictable. Greco walks south at night, hiding by day, guided by instinct and half-remembered roads. He sees burned-out vehicles, executed bodies left as warnings, German patrols moving with sharp discipline through towns that have learned to fear uniforms again. This is not liberation. This is something messier, something unfinished. The invasion of Sicily did not merely knock Italy out of the war. It shattered the country's structure, exposing the fragile scaffolding beneath 2 decades of dictatorship and illusion. When that scaffolding collapsed, it crushed those standing beneath it first. Greco reaches the outskirts of his home village days later, thinner, dirtier, older than the man who marched to the coast in July believing the war would never touch him. Church bells ring softly in the distance, not in celebration, but in cautious acknowledgement of survival. The war has reached Italy's doorstep. Now it has entered its streets. Mid-September 1943, southern Italy. Caporale Salvatore Greco reaches his village just before dawn, slipping between familiar stone walls as if afraid they might reject him. The bakery is dark. The square is empty. Only the church stands unchanged, its doors closed, its bells silent now that the night's warning has passed. He knocks once on his family's door. When it opens, his mother stares at him as if at a ghost. Then she pulls him inside without a word, gripping his sleeve as if he might vanish again if she lets go. His father stands behind her, flour still on his hands, eyes wet but steady. No one asks questions at first. They eat bread in silence. Real bread. The taste nearly overwhelms him. Only later does his father speak. "The Germans passed through yesterday," he says. "North. They took what they wanted." Greco nods. He has already learned the pattern. Italy has been split open like a wound that will not close. The south fills with Allied uniforms, British khaki, American olive drab, moving steadily north. The north hardens under German control, transformed into a new battlefield layered atop the old one. In between lies a gray zone of fear, resistance, and reprisal. The war has not ended. It has multiplied. Former Italian soldiers face choices no order will ever clarify. Some surrender to the Allies and are absorbed into new formations. Some are captured by the Germans and shipped north into camps that will swallow them by the hundreds of thousands. Others slip into the hills, joining bands of civilians, deserters, and escaped prisoners who begin to fight a new kind of war. Small, desperate, and personal. Greco listens as neighbors whisper of ambushes in mountain passes, of German convoys burned at night, of reprisals that leave entire villages emptied or dead by morning. The word partigiani begins to circulate with equal parts hope and dread. One evening, a man Greco does not recognize knocks on the door. "You were army," the man says quietly. "We need men who know rifles." Greco does not answer immediately. He looks at his parents, at the walls that have sheltered generations, at the knowledge that nothing, not surrender, not neutrality, not obedience, will protect them if the war returns here again. "I'll think," he says. In Rome, a new government struggles to exist while fleeing its own capital. The king and Badoglio have escaped south under Allied protection, leaving much of the country leaderless. In the vacuum, German authority asserts itself with ruthless clarity. The illusion of unity is gone. Italy is now two wars at once, liberation in the south, occupation in the north, with civilians trapped in both. Weeks after the armistice, Allied troops push steadily up the peninsula, encountering fierce German resistance dug into mountains and rivers. Progress is measured in yards, paid for in blood. The war that once seemed distant now unfolds across Italy's spine. For Greco, the shock of invasion has transformed into something quieter but heavier: responsibility. The war is no longer something imposed from above. It has become something that demands a personal answer. That night, he walks into the hills with the stranger who came to the door, carrying a rifle that once belonged to someone else. Below them, the village sleeps uneasily, unaware of how close history still lingers. Italy did not fall in a single moment. Cracked, slowly, under pressure it could no longer deny. The soldiers who once believed the war would never reach them have learned otherwise. Not through speeches or proclamations, but through the sound of boots on stone, the sight of foreign flags, and the silence left behind when authority collapses. The war reached Italy's doorstep in July. By autumn, it lived there. October 1943, the hills above the Apennines. The mountains are colder than Greco remembers. Nights bite deeper here, the wind slicing through wool uniforms never meant for this kind of fighting. The men gathered around the small fire are no longer a unit in any official sense. There are no ranks spoken aloud, no salutes, no paperwork that says who they are. They are simply armed men trying to stay alive. Greco learns quickly that this war obeys different rules. There are no front lines, only routes and timings. No barrages, only single shots fired at close range and then silence. Ammunition is precious. Food is negotiated for, stolen, or shared. Trust is everything, and it is never complete. The man who recruited him is called Marco. That may or may not be his real name. He speaks little, but when he does, others listen. He explains things in practical terms. "We don't hold ground," Marco says. "We make the Germans afraid to move." The first ambush Greco participates in lasts less than 30 seconds. A German truck slows on a narrow road. A mine detonates beneath its front axle. Rifle fire erupts from both sides of the pass. When it is over, the truck burns and the men are already gone, melting into trees and rock. Greco's hands shake afterward, not from fear, but from the intimacy of it. He saw faces, heard voices. This is not the distant violence of artillery or air power. This is war at breathing distance. German reprisals follow swiftly. A village down the slope is searched. Men are lined up. 2 are taken away. 1 does not return. The message is clear. and it spreads faster than any leaflet. Greco watches smoke rise from the valley and understands the cruel arithmetic now governing Italy. Every action has a cost paid by people who did not choose to fight. Yet doing nothing feels worse, an acceptance of occupation that offers no safety either. This is how the war traps everyone. Across the peninsula, the front grinds northward. Naples is liberated.
Romwe.
German defenses harden along rivers and ridges with names that will soon become synonymous with death. The Allies push. The Germans hold. Italy bleeds in between. For the first time since the invasion, Greco hears Allied artillery again. Distant, steady, moving closer. The sound is different now. Not an enemy's approach, but a pressure building from the south. In villages under German control, civilians begin to take risks. Information is passed quietly. Food disappears from storerooms and reappears in the hills. The occupation becomes heavier, more paranoid, more violent. The war has shed all pretense. One evening, as rain begins to fall, Marco looks toward the south and speaks almost to himself. They will reach Rome, he says, but not quickly. Greco thinks of the beaches of Sicily, of the first shock when the sea turned black with ships. Feels like a lifetime ago. The war that arrived so suddenly now refuses to leave. He adjusts the strap of his rifle and settles deeper into the darkness of the trees. He is no longer shocked. He is changed.